Police commissioner says information about police manpower handling national security is top secret. And the U.S. launches attacks in the Middle East in retaliation to the earlier death of American soldiers. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Police Commissioner Raymond Siu attended the passing out parade at the Police College today. He stressed the force will strictly enforce Article 23 of the Basic Law once it has been implemented. When asked whether the police will increase its manpower for enforcement purposes, Siu said the information is highly confidential. Timothy Lee has our top story.
A passing out parade was held at the Hong Kong Police College at Wang Shu Kang this morning. A total of 27 probationary inspectors and 127 new police constables passed out today. Police Commissioner Raymond Siu said it is of utmost importance for any country or territory to ensure national security. He added that the police serve as the backbone of national security enforcement and that citizens also share responsibility. Siu noted Hong Kong will only be truly safe if the nation is safe, and that the force will be strict in combating those who break the law. The Police Force's National Security Department was established the day after the implementation of the National Security Law in the SAR on June 30th in 2020, and is headed by a Deputy Police Commissioner. In December of that year, the government allocated $8 billion for national security purposes and provided an additional $5 billion for the same reason in March last year. The department's manpower arrangements have not been disclosed since 2020. Now, people are asking how those arrangements could be impacted upon Article 23 legislation. But the police commissioner said the information is highly confidential. He also said there has been a rise in police applications after the force adjusted its recruitment requirements in May last year. More than 9,600 applied as of December last year. It was almost 8,000 in 2022. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
As the consultation period for Article 23 under the Basic Law has started, Secretary for Security Chris Tang and Secretary for Justice Paul Lam said the government is considering including the public interest defense for the state secrets-related legislation. The consultation period for the legislation of Article 23 has begun and will wrap up on the 28th of this month. One big question is whether the journalistic practice of publishing confidential or internal information from the government will constitute the disclosure of state secrets. Secretary for Security Chris Tang said if the information was taken through normal circumstances or when the officials expected media coverage, it won't be a problem. Such circumstances include informal briefings with government officials. In other cases, the disclosure of compromising information should prove to be on issues of public interest. And such public interest should outweigh the risk it brings to national security. Tang explained with this hypothetical scenario that a journalist happens to know that the Secretary for Security is a foreign spy agent and his policies could harm a lot of people. In such an extreme case, it's possible the reporter can use the public interest reason to defend his whistleblowing effort. Secretary for Justice Paul Lam, meanwhile, said freedom of the press and speech should be subject to the limits of the law, and public interest issues are not information used to satisfy curiosity. He said such disclosure of state secrets should be of urgent and critical concern for the public and could compromise public safety or public health if kept under wraps. Only when these factors outweigh the risk they pose to national security can the public interest defense be applied, Lam said. Ronnie Tong, an executive council member and a senior counsel, said the public interest defense is helpful to allay some concerns over Article 23's legislation, but there should be clear guidelines over what constitutes public interest.
For anything to override that public interest, there must be very clear provisions, there must be very clear guidelines to the courts to enable them to come to a balanced review of the competing public interests that one is talking about.
The Security Secretary also said the law's definition of foreign forces include governments and political parties, but not universities. Hong Kong's Messi craze continues throughout the day as locals and tourists flock to the Hong Kong Stadium. Organizers reminded fans not to purchase tickets via unofficial channels. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Messi fans were eager to catch a glimpse of their idol even before the start of tomorrow's match. Many people arrived 3 hours prior to the football legends training session at the Hong Kong Stadium. Sporting jerseys adorned with the name of the favorite footballer, the crowd formed a sea of white, blue, and pink. Some even brought handmade signs to greet the icon.
He's a genius. He's an absolute goat. He's coming to Hong Kong, and it's just unbelievable. It's a dream come true, so we can't wait.
This man said he fell in love with football because of Messi, and that he gets excited whenever the little flea scores. Messi's last appearance in the SAR was around a decade ago. Besides locals, his arrival this time also attracted tourists. This tourist from Beijing said it was worth it to come all the way to the city as long as you're a fan of Messi. Each ticket to the stadium carries a unique QR code that will be scanned upon entry. Organizers reminded fans not to purchase tickets via unofficial channels. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Overseas, a campaign of U.S. retaliatory strikes has begun in the Middle East. Long-range bombers were launched from America in a series of punishing strikes against Iranian-backed groups implicated in last weekend's deadly attack on American forces. This report from NBC.
The American retaliatory strikes have begun. U.S. Central Command saying late this evening, U.S. forces began striking more than 85 targets in Iraq and Syria, using numerous aircraft, including long-range bombers flown from the U.S. The targets, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Quds Force and affiliated militia groups, hitting their command and control operations centers and intelligence centers, rockets and missiles, and unmanned air vehicle storage, among other sites. President Biden tonight saying our response began today. It will continue at times and places of our choosing, adding, let all those who might seek to do us harm know this. If you harm an American, we will respond. The U.S. strikes come in response to that deadly drone attack by Iranian-backed militias that struck Tower 22, a desert outpost in Jordan, killing 3 U.S. service members. That attack among more than 160 against American targets by Iranian-backed militias since October. President Biden had previously authorized limited strikes in response that even he acknowledged had not deterred the militias. And the president has been under pressure to respond more forcefully, especially after American service members were killed. All of it just hours after the commander-in-chief performed one of his most solemn duties, attending the dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base as the remains of those 3 U.S. service members returned home. The President and First Lady joining the grieving families of 46-year-old Sergeant William Rivers, a soldier's soldier, his cousin said, 24-year-old Sergeant Kennedy Sanders, whose family said she was always full of life, and 23-year-old Sergeant Brianna Moffett, her parents remembering how she could light up a room. The U.S. today also launching preemptive strikes on the Iranian-backed Houthis.
The U.S. strikes come against the backdrop of Israel's war with Hamas. America's representative at the United Nations says the country is trying to broker a peace deal. David Garrett reports.
In footage released by the IDF, they said the Israeli military eliminated numerous terrorists in close-quarter battles. Body cam shots show soldiers attacking what they say are Hamas fighters in the Gaza Strip. But there could be a ceasefire in sight. Diplomatic maneuvers continue to broker peace as battles like this continue. A Hamas official said they will respond very soon to a proposal that would extend pauses in fighting and phased exchanges of Hamas-held hostages.
We've been working tirelessly with Qatar, Egypt, and other regional partners on a strong, compelling proposal. Our engagement is the best opportunity to reunite all hostages with their families.
The plight of many Palestinians remains dire. These injured children have been evacuated to Egypt and will travel on to Qatar for treatment. Israel has said it plans to attack areas on the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing in the coming days. These youngsters may have got out just in time. A small Israeli protest broke out at another entry point to the Strip after UNRWA employees, the main aid agency for the Palestinians, were implicated in the October 7th attack. Some people say all aid must be halted.
The aid is making the war take longer. It is strengthening the enemy, the very enemy that we are fighting against.
You're American, New York! No way!
The US is one of 17 countries that have suspended payments for UNRWA. This is the latest pictures emerge of the devastating living conditions for some civilians in Gaza City. Wet weather, a lack of food and medicine, and many buildings reduced to rubble make streets like this uninhabitable. Aid workers say the money for UNRWA is a matter of life and death.
Maybe financially it will be enough till the end of this month, and after that this decision have a very destructive impact on our operation.
Thousands in Sana'a in Yemen are staging protests to show solidarity with Palestinians. Meanwhile, there is anger across many parts of the world that not enough is being done. More than 800 serving officials in the US and Europe have signed a statement urging their own governments to do more. David Garrett, TVB News.
And still ahead, residents flock to flower markets ahead of the Chinese New Year, which is a week away. United Nations top court will decide whether Ukraine conducted genocide. A look at what makes East Timor's coffee so good. Welcome back. The Year of the Dragon is just a week away. Many Hong Kong residents flock to buy flowers today, a Chinese tradition that is seen to bring good luck and fortune to people for the new year. Take a look. Lilies, narcissus. These are not just pretty sights to behold, but also auspicious symbols of fortune, harmony, and joy to many Chinese households. Mr. Wang here said he bought these daffodils, which are believed to bring prosperity, hoping the blooms could usher in good luck in his Mark 6 draw next time. Another popular floral choice are these orchids. Miss Cheng here bought 3 pots in one go, hoping they bring abundance and prosperity to her household. There could be bargains with some prices cut by around 20% this year. This is because the economy is not faring well, this vendor said. Starting today, there are also special traffic arrangements along roads in the vicinity of the flower markets. The flower markets will be open for 7 days starting Sunday and will close in the early morning of the first day of the Chinese New Year. For the first time since 2019, the fairs feature fast food and dry goods. Enhanced MTR services too starting today until the 18th of February. On Lunar New Year's Eve, all local railway lines except Airport Express and Disneyland Resort Line and 7 light rail routes will operate overnight. Overseas again, Russia had earlier claimed that Ukraine was responsible for the crime of genocide, which was one of the reasons Moscow used to justify its invasion nearly 2 years ago. The United Nations top court said Friday it has jurisdiction to rule on a request by Ukraine for a declaration that Kyiv is not responsible for genocide. Danny Rao tells us more.
The United Nations top court said on Friday it has jurisdiction to rule on a request by Ukraine for a declaration that Kyiv is not responsible for genocide. The ruling comes in a case filed by Ukraine alleging that Moscow used trumped-up claims of genocide to justify its invasion nearly 2 years ago.
It is important that the court will decide on the issue that Ukraine is not responsible for some mythical genocide which the Russian Federation falsely alleged that Ukraine has been committing since 2014 in Donbass, and so it means that the obligation of the Russian Federation to immediately suspend all the military activities in the territory of Ukraine is there, and it is a legal obligation which the Russian Federation must fulfill.
Russian officials left the court without commenting. Last September, Moscow's legal team told ICJ judges that Russia had not used the Genocide Convention to justify its military actions in Ukraine, saying they're based on the right to self-determination and its inherent right to self-defense. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin described Moscow's military action in Ukraine as a battle for Russia's survival, as he campaigned for re-election next month in balloting that he's all but certain to win. Speaking at a meeting with arms industry's workers in the city of Tula, south of Moscow, Putin declared that the vast majority of Russians support his cause. He again argued that sending troops into Ukraine was necessary to protect Russian speakers in eastern Ukraine and stop what he described as attempts by Washington and its NATO allies to encroach on Moscow's vital security interests. Putin said that despite Western expectations Russia would collapse quickly under the brunt of sanctions, its economy has grown and military industries have sharply increased output. General TV News.
Argentinian protesters clashed with riot police as a key Javier Milei bill passed through Congress. Some protesters are concerned that the deregulatory law gives the new president more economic powers. It would drastically reform the state, cut government spending, and include the privatization of public companies. Debates and votes are required in the Senate before the cornerstone of Milei's economic policy becomes law. And many people in East Timor are proud of the export of their country's coffee. Some local coffee farmers recently saw a 4-fold increase in their income thanks to assistance offered by Chinese businesses. Timothy Lee reports.
Farmers in East Timor laboring under the sun inspecting coffee plants for parasites and diseases. Local farmer Annabella, who owns a coffee farm in an area 1,400 meters above sea level, began her business in the 1980s and has grown around 5,000 coffee plants as of now. Many of these plants consist of coffee luwak, otherwise known as civet coffee, which is a type of high-quality coffee created through coffee beans fermented through a civet's intestines. Due to poor management, Annabella makes only around $600 from her coffee business. But her situation finally improved 5 years ago when Chen Li Song was sent by his company in the mainland to East Timor to teach locals how to properly manage older coffee plants and increase coffee bean production. Chen said the Southeast Asian nation's climate is very suitable for growing coffee plants, owing to extended periods of sunlight. He added local farmers are taught how to gather the harvest without accidentally picking the unripe fruit. Annabella noted her annual salary has reached over $3,000 after listening to Chen's instructions. That number has surpassed the average East Timorese salary. She said she was happy to see an increase of coffee production and that her new income allowed her to send her children to university. Chen also decided to stay in the East Timorese capital of Dili to run his own coffee business and started a coffee workshop to train the staff and farmers. Meanwhile, a local coffee association said the main clients of East Timorese coffee are in Europe and the US, but emphasized the great potential of the coffee market in China.
Our plantation is too old and the production is too low. And you can compare that our production per hectare is around 150 to 200 kg per hectare, but in China is 15 to 25 tons per hectare. Of course, in China they use the new technology, but also use the organic manure. And I think this can be important support that can give us because we want to maintain our coffee as organic.
Oliveira said he hopes the mainland will continue to offer their support to local farmers. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Brazilians don't normally need a special reason to go to the beach, but several took to the sands in Rio to celebrate the goddess of the sea. Ceremonies happen at different times of the year, but in early February, hundreds of Brazilians come from all over the country to celebrate Iemanjá in Ipanema Beach, meaning the Great Mother of the Sea. The roots of this worship come from Africa. Traditionally, Iemanjá was the protector of sailors and fishermen, but now many women believe it can help them in love and motherhood. They dress in white and offer jewelry and flowers, believing that it can bring them success in their own lives. In the U.S., authorities say a pilot and 2 people on the ground died when a small plane crashed into a Florida mobile home park. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration said the pilot reported engine failure shortly before disappearing from radar near St. Petersburg Clearwater International Airport. The pilot was the only person aboard the plane. The crash ripped apart one mobile home and destroyed a trailer. The FAA said investigators have now arrived in Clearwater. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.